say it again. This is our third lecture in the series of five, or the five. The general title, you remember, is Who Are We? Today, we've been speaking about the beginning of art in Israel, concentrating on the Tzalel Academy and Boris Shah's story. Then we're talking about 1950s, the first decade of independent Israel, about the pluralism and the hegemony of those years. Today we'll be focusing on the 1970s, mainly on political art of the time, with an emphasis on what we call conceptual art. Not necessarily. Let's begin with this famous photo taken by famous the late David Rubinger in 1967, June 1967, with these three parachuters, Israeli soldiers, being photographed near the Wailing Wall, short time after it's been conquered by the Israeli IDF. Until these very days, there is a trial going on in Israel, a harsh one. People claiming that they are the ones who are the photograph, and not the others who think they are sort of the ones. So, but that's beside the point. I start with this photograph in order to say that something that you know, that those days of the Six-Day War, especially days afterwards, a grand sense of euphoria took over Israel, together with a strong nationalistic feeling, okay, which affected artists as well, okay, who would go and many of them, not all of them, record views of by camera, by paintings, of the new territories of the old city of Jerusalem, mixing it with some symbols of holiness, holy symbols, as if God is directly responsible for the victory in the war. One example of the reaction of artists to the war would be, I'm talking about this euphorian reaction to the war, would be this painting done by Moshe Kastel. You remember his name from the New Horizon group, the abstract group that we were talking about last time, called A Wall of Glory, okay? You can easily detect the something like the Wailing Wall, done in mixed in pigments, red mixed with ground basalt. Together, of course, the red is there to increase the enthusiasm, the passion of the times. Some archaic or pseudo-archaic Hebrew letters above, and a collage, a photograph being stuck, glued to the basalt, representing a multitude of Israeli soldiers near the wall, again, shortly after it's taken by the army, with General Rabin on the left, even together with a piece of the Dome of the Rock, so-called the place of the temple, in order to create a kind of a new unity between two sacred places. Okay, and of course, there's a big portrait down here of Moshe Dayan, smiling, the hero of the war, being then the Minister of Security. Another example of euphoric work that was done by artists immediately after 67 June was created by Mordechai Ardon, called At the Gates of Jerusalem, a triptych that was composed of, like all triptychs, three parts, three panels, you know, using or depicting Kabbalah symbols. This time, the sphere of the tree of spheres is fully lit. a chapter or a page, with the Psalms praising God, the ladders of Jacob, gathering on the top of hovering on the walls of Jerusalem, and as if expecting angels to come down, many of them from the sky. On the right panel, you would see the primordial stone, which according to the Midrash that I don't remember from his childhood, Hasidic childhood, God threw into the abyss as preparation for the act of creating the world. What you can see is that Ardon used or appropriated the gold from the dome of the rock up there. Okay, now it's part of the triptych of praising Jerusalem and praising the
that gold.
That's gold. It's a paint of gold. It's not a real gold. Okay, although if you pay for a painting like that, another one. We don't have the reproduction in colors. It's taken from a catalog of Shmuel Boneh, artist, who painted this. You can see the Lion of Judea again flying over the Wailing Wall, the Tower of David, combined with the wheels of the Merkavah that carried the prophet Ezekiel envisioned in the first chapter of Ezekiel. Wings of fire, the Israeli soldier with a helmet blowing a shofar, as a reminder, of course, of the famous blowing that Rabbi Shlomo Goren, the chief rabbi of the army, blew near the Wailing Wall hours after his being conquered. Well, with such a background, such a euphoric, enthusiastic feeling, when books and albums of victory were published, songs of victory were heard, especially Jerusalem of Gold, how daring, how provocative, how, I would use the word chutzpah, would be of the side of Yigal Tumarkin. You remember his name from the last time, to create during a few days after the end of the war, this sculpture, one of the most important sculptures ever done in Israeli history, Israeli art history, in 1967, named "He Walked in the Fields." Well, you see the soldier not as a heroic one, not as a victorious one, on the contrary, abused, despised. His pants are rolled down, his penis is out, his arms are amputated. Hello. His tongue is out there, he's vomiting, he's a sick one. He's all smashed, and the face is the face of the artist being cast in gold, in bronze, sorry. And carrying, you see in his belly this ball, this bombshell, which recalls, of course, and this explains also the title of the work, a famous poem by Nathan Alterman from the 1940s called "The Three Mothers," where one of the mothers and three mothers of dead soldiers, and one of them tells of her son. He's walking in the fields. He's carrying a lead ball in his heart. So Tumarkin had this version of his. I'll also add that the title "He Walked in the Fields," "Hu Halach Basadot," is the name of another word very famous in Israel of Ordier. It was a novel by Moshe Shamir that was rearranged as a play. Famous play describing the sacrifice. Uri, a young Sabra, sacrificing himself during the war of independence. As you can see here, and another close-up of another version of the same work of Eagle Tumarkin. The rifles are aiming at us. Tumarkin started welding arms 1964, 1965. The time he also began casting his own organs and heads, sometimes arms and hands, into his sculpture. Also, one may mention the influence of pop art, either here or in former work. You see the use of colors reminds of pop art that was beginning to strongly influence Israeli art scene around 65, 60, 66, with the, I mentioned it last time, Americanization of Israeli culture in general. So the same Eagle Tumarkin, you see his work from 1965 called The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Philoctetes. Well, Philoctetes is the name of a tragedy by Sophocles, telling the story of that Philoctetes that was left. He was a soldier in the army of Odysseus, and he was beaten by a snake and was left by his friends, the soldiers, to die on an island. Tumarkin took him as a subject, again, amputated one leg, aimed the rifles at us. The face, of course, the portrait is the one of the artist. So we're talking about a different kind of approach, a different kind of reaction to the Six-Day War, something that was quite rare, I would say even very rare among Israeli artists of the time. Another example would be Tumarkin's assemblage called Sinai, okay, relating to the Sinai, the war in Sinai, which again was very victorious. But what you see here is it's a disastrous area, okay, with the artists again with the tongue out. You see the barbed wire, the wooden planks around, a lot of chaos and danger, etc. And even some helmet, one or two shoes that recall that remind us of the fleeing Egyptian soldier that take off their shoes and ran barefoot in the desert. Well, Tumarkin was not the only one who reacted critically and protestingly to the war, to the Six-Day War, the 67 war. As rare as it was, there was another one, Shimon Sabar. Shimon Sabar was one of the gang, one of the artists, not many of them, who worked, you remember, some of you were in my last lecture, you know what I'm talking about, who were working in Haifa during the early 50s as part of the social realism of the time, okay? Most of them socialists, some communists. He was radical leftist. He was a famous satirist in the newspapers. He wrote fantastic stories for children. But above all, he was a painter. He was a very good draftsman. He drew very well and influenced his friends in that Haifa group. And now, shortly before leaving Israel for good, in favor of London, where he died some 10, 15 years ago, he made this collage, this version of course, Guernica, Picasso's Guernica from 37, adding the American firehawks of the Israeli army of that time, bombing from above. You can see the Israeli soldiers crossing the Suez. No, it's not crossing the Suez Canal. They didn't cross the Suez Canal, but Israeli soldiers here and the tank bombing. And of course, you can see Moshe Dayan is very happy down there on the left. Another one, the last one that I mentioned in this respect of criticizing, protesting against the war, you don't have to sit. You don't have to sit. Is a drawing by Ruth Schloss. Again, I mentioned her name as a leftist artist of the 1950s, social realist, a communist, or at that time. I nicknamed her, as historians tend to do in Israel, as the Israeli Keta Kolbitz, okay, very with a lot of moral commitment. This time drawing the Palestinians, okay, leaving the houses in the what will be the occupied territories, the conquered territories, crossing destroy the bombed bridges of the Jordan on the way to the Palestinian camps. And another drawing of them, all from 67. You know, you see the corpses of probably of Palestinians, of Arabs, that drawn by Ruth Schloss, who's now having a retrospective at the Palestinian village in Umm Museum in Israel. All right, so another war was at the door, coming in October 73, the Yom Kippur War, and I bring this, show you this photograph where you see on the right side, of course, Arik Sharon with his famous bandage. He was slightly injured, but he kept on that bandage, the heroic, you know, sign, together with Chaim Bar-Lev, the ex-chief of staff, who was recruited in order to calm down the generals that were quarreling between themselves. And now, as a reaction to this, well, one of the artists that were mobilized to the war was the same Yigal Tumarkin that we saw that he walked in the field before, and he was now in the role of a war journalist in Sharon's platoon, where he kept a diary during the war, recording whatever Sharon was saying and whatever he saw and his thought, etc. Now, I mean, January 74, when the war is not really over yet, yeah, he had a one-man show at Tel Aviv Museum's Helena Rubinstein Pavilion with large acrylic works, very much influenced by pop art, especially as you can see Andy Warhol's exhibition influence. Here with some text from his diary, recounting Sharon's plans to become a politician, okay, and even adding, you see the letters Chet and Kaf, which means in Hebrew, a member, a parliament member. So already Tumarkin knew where Sharon is aiming. Down here, you can see a horse taken directly from Paolo Uccello's 1440, a famous, the Battle of San Romano, one of three works, one of them is very famous in the National Gallery in London. But Tumarkin translating the heroic wars of Uccello into carousel children, a playful horse. And another work from this exhibition of January 74, today it's complicated, you see again the horse, the Paolo Uccello horse. The colors are more phosphoric, like the kind of color one sees in a night vision instruments that were used by the army to mark into as his colors in many of his paintings. The general atmosphere of the war here, depicted here, is more science fiction, like in the style. And of course, 3 times Moshe Dayan, and 1 time you have General Shmuel Gonen, was very controversial during and after, especially after the war, when he left his big diamonds in Africa. But hello, welcome. I think we need more chairs. I think we need another hall, maybe. What about the Covent Garden? How do you call it? Madison Square Garden. Okay. You missed the most important. So, but generally, the artist's reaction to the Yom Kippur War, the 73 war, was more tragic because we are talking about heavy feelings, almost feelings of mourning, took over Israel following what was considered the failure of the war, although one can see also achievements in that war, finally, you know. But if you take, for instance, this triptych that was done again by Ardon, you remember Mordechai Ardon reacted with the 1967 war, with praising, etc., etc. Now he is reacting tragically, okay, with a kind of a cosmic crisis, torn skies, dark skies, eclipse. Hebrew letters are falling down, and in the middle, of course, these two stains, red stains of blood over what can be taken as either a landscape or a lying corpse. Okay? So, I think I know the main panel is called Requiem. So this was a different kind of reaction to the war. Now we're talking about we're talking about doesn't get up. Yes, it doesn't get bigger. Last time, okay. We're talking about wars, but one should talk about art, okay? Because during those same years of 67, 1973, a big change occurred in the Western art world, and a new phase of art, a new chapter of art history evolved, which would be called later on conceptual art. And now in 1966, these photographs from 1966 exhibition that was shown in Bern, Switzerland, curated by the famous curator Herald Zeman. The exhibition was called "When Attitudes Become Form." It was consisted mainly by Italian artists from Milano, who later would be grouped under the title of Arte Povera, poor art, together with some Americans that we will mention maybe some of them as conceptual artists later on, and one German famous charismatic artist called Joseph Beuys, who you will see immediately. As you may see, when Attitudes Become Form on the exhibition, was proposing a new relation to art, and art that is not demanding interference of creativity by the artist. The art is done by choice, by the choosing artist to decide that take a ready-made, or as my good friend who sits here, Joshua Neustein, whom you will hear about later on, used to call all ready-made, okay, the ready-made taken just as they are. I mean, purely the object, the original material, you know, showing or displaying the materials as they are with some emphasis on processes, okay? Chemical processes, electrifying processes, rotting processes, biological processes, etc. This was the idea of that kind of exhibition, this kind of proposition in 1966. If to give just one example of relation or treatment of material and processes, to make it more clear, I'll show this work done between 64 and 70, or repeatedly by that German Joseph Beuys that I mentioned. It's called stool, okay? And what you see on the stool is this block of fat, okay? It's fat that Joseph Beuys could also smear around the hole and the corners and the down panels. Why did he do that? For him, the fat represented a material that transfers energies, versus which he would install layers of felt which he considered as blocking energies. So with these two materials, he would reorganize spaces, environments, nature, okay? Functioning as kind of a shaman, kind of the high priest who controls nature with the use of these two opposing materials. But 1970 already, there was another very important exhibition shown at the MoMA, not far from here, if you don't know 54th Street. Called Information. The exhibition was called Information. It was the main exhibition, although there was one in '69, but this was the main one proposing this new art, new kind of art called conceptual art, or if you want, idea art. Again, no interference, no creative interference in the sense of no material need of the artist to build, to shape, to design, to formulate forms and structures. It's enough just to express the idea, either through words or photograph or some other way, or by just picking the ready-mades. So, for example, you see this work, one work that was shown at the Information exhibition at the MoMA, done by a Hungarian-American artist, famous one, Joseph Kossuth, or I was told that one should say Joseph Kossuth. All right, so you have three options of representation here. One is a real chair, okay? One is a photograph of a chair, and one is a word, a definition, a dictionary definition of a chair. For Kossuth, the dictionary is enough in order to create a work. For instance, he wants to show art, you want to see art. There you see, there, oh la la. Calm down, oh doesn't move. Oh la la, now. Okay, you know what, I should not enlarge the words. No, it's not enough. Okay, so for instance, you see, for him, you want art, you have the dictionary definition of art. At that time, those days, a letter arrived to Israel Museum, to the mythological curator who just died a year ago, Yonah Fisher, who was the chief curator of Israeli art and modern art. From an American artist, a letter from an American artist, a famous one here at that time, named Robert Switzer, proposing to make an artwork, okay, kind of art that he was specializing in it, which was called earth art. By earth art, the artist spent in moving huge rocks, digging deep holes in the ground, changing the landscape, or in faraway desert, Nevada, Arizona, etc., etc. What, like this example, for example, of Robert Smith's work, famous work, named Jetty Spiral at the in Utah lake, okay, which he did in 1970. By the way, 3 years later, he died photographing a work of his, and it was a crash of the helicopter, and he was only 35 years old. But to go back to our, can we go back? Yeah. To that letter that arrived, Smithson had an idea to dig some soil, some earth, very near the cave of the patriarchs in Hebron, okay, a very sacred place, okay, where Isaac, Abraham, Isaac, Sarah, etc. Some people say that first Adam is buried there, yeah, and move the earth from that place to the Temple Mount, okay, and rearranging the earth from Hebron in the form of Tafshin Lamed, which in Hebrew, of course, represents a date, 1970, okay? That was his proposal. I believe that Yonah Fisher answered him, because this letter was for sale from Yonah Fisher's collection, okay, not many years ago, okay? But the work has never been carried out in Israel because the time Israeli art of the 1969, when the letter arrived, was not ripe yet, okay? Was not ripe for such daring, progressive work, not yet. Because 1969 was the year that this work was shown at the artist's house in Jerusalem, called Boots, okay, done by our friend Joshua Neustein, sitting here in the middle, and two friends of his, but mainly by his leadership, where they picked some 1,500 boots, military boots, from a not too far storage near Ramallah, and spreading it all over the rooms of the artist's house in Jerusalem, so that visitors would march, would step on the piles, while hearing steps walking, in a recorded sound at the background. This was considered the first environmental work in the history of Israel. Okay, thanks to our friends who came from America in 1964 from New York. Okay, who stayed in 1978 and go back to New York. Now living in New York, not too far from here. Okay, the same year, few months afterwards, the same Neustein showed this work that really provoked the prize that was received with kind of with awe, showing the work at the Helena Rubinstein Pavilion of Tel Aviv Museum during what they called the Autumn Salon, Salon Astar, that was happening every year on September, where young experimental Israeli artists were invited to show their avant-garde works. Joshua Neustein arranged these piles, these packages of hay or straw in the form of grid on the floor of the museum. Nearby, you don't see, there was a rolled asphalt sheet, okay, partly rolled and partly open, reminding a road, okay. The work was called a road piece, again with the sound of moving cars, okay. So you had a kind of a memory of a landscape that one saw, one can see, while passing near a field, open field. But by now, thanks to the memory, the cognition, okay, moves, transfers the landscape from reality, from the world, into the art scene, okay? Turning into minimalistic work because of the grid structure, okay? Again, we're still with Mr. Neustein, who is responsible for yet another revolutionary work. He would drive me crazy, this machine. Luckily, I only have other two lectures. Okay. Okay, we'll leave it small. This work was practically the first important conceptual work in Israel. Okay, we're talking about 1970. MoMA showing its exhibition of information, as it was called. And Neustein and a friend, you see him, Jerry Marks, another friend who came from New York in '64, I think, who was responsible for the sound. What they did was they installed, or I would say Neustein installed, along some 1 mile, scores of tiny loudspeakers, okay, along the so-called Kidron River or Kidron Wadi, a dry river, a river with no water, okay, But according to Midrash or legends, the water will flow in Kidron Valley when Messiah will arrive. So now reacting, one can say, to the messianic enthusiasm of the days following the war, Six-Day War, now there was this environmental conceptual comment that created the flowing river through sound. Okay, so you walked along the river, and the hidden loudspeakers will record or will broadcast the sound of the river. Now you can see there's in the way he looked then. Oh yeah. With the nun, because the beginning, it all started near the Saint Clair Monastery in Jerusalem, continuing into the so-called river of Kidron. So you have here one of the nuns of the Saint Clair, which is very near my house, by the way. My house is overlooking the Kidron River, etc. Okay, I'll try to make it bigger, nevertheless. No, I'll leave it as it is. Can you see it this way? Okay. Excuse me. All right. Now came the time for Israel to show its conceptual art, the new conceptual art. The date was 1971. The curator was Yonah Fisher, the same guy. The name of the exhibition was Concept plus Information. Okay, the information was, of course, taken from the MoMA, okay, but Concept plus Information was a group show. At the very end, you can see the scaffoldings that were done by Georgette Bellier, the late Georgette Bellier, was a fine artist, and one of the assistants or collaborators of Neustein in the works that I mentioned, for sure the one in the Boots one. On the floor here is a work by Avital Geva, whom we'll talk about more later on, displaying a rubber sheet, okay, in which some puddles of rain were collected and being dried continually, which may remind us, should remind us, the idea of the material and processes of the when attitudes become formed from 1966. You remember that we talked about that show in Bern. That was enough for him to show material and process of the drying of the water that collected outside. Okay, here behind this wall, there's a group of photographs by Neustein, who photographed the back of his photograph, then photographed the space on the wall where the photograph is supposed to be hung, then the inside of the wall, and then the behind the wall, and then a photograph of the room, adjoining room, the next room, and then a room after room after room, photographing the photograph, continually until the last one is the exit, is out. You know? So you had a process, again, a work of memory, okay? The work that remembers itself, its source, leading you continually from outward to the world, to the real world. Art and life, art and world, world and art. Speaking about art and life, unity of art and life, which was very popular those days, of course, mainly United States and Europe happenings, think of that. I would like to show you a very important, interesting work that was done in 1972, the summer of 1972, by the same Avital Geva that you saw the rubber sheet with the puddle before. Avital Geva was then, still is, a kibbutz member from Ein Shemer, not far from Hedera. And what he arranged, he called some 5-6 artists, friends from the avant-garde of the time, to join him to a week or so of activities in in real life, on the spot. Okay. So what he did personally in that project, which we call today Netzer Miser project. Netzer being the name of a kibbutz, and Miser is a neighboring Arab village. And immediately you'll see why this name. Because now on the same line, on the borderline between the Arab villages and the kibbutz, okay, or the kibbutzim of that area, Avital Keva installed several metal containers into which he poured some hundreds, if not more, of used secondhand books, which he collected from a nearby paper mill, okay, and left it as it is. And within hours, Jews and Arabs, kibbutznik members and our villagers would come and pick books and change, their views about books, or consult, you should read this and read that. We're talking about kind of an open, spontaneous library that combines and proposes harmony between two conflicting cultures and society. Here you have another example, another photograph of the same project, which is, of course, utopian in its contents. Another one in the group of that project was Micha Ullman. We're talking about big names in Israeli art. It's not just that I picked, some from distance. All these are leading artists of today's Israeli art. Micha Ullman, together with young children from the village Miser, dug a hole in the ground, a meter by meter by meter, loading the earth on a truck, leading the earth to the kibbutz, Netzer, okay, together with local children of the kibbutz, digging a hole in the ground, pouring the Arab land into the Jewish hole, and on the contrary, the Jewish earth into the Arab hole, like that kind of, as if they are signing a treaty, like in a blood treaty, a treaty of peace when you exchange blood with your enemy. Okay. A third one, in the same project, was Moshe Gershuni. Moshe Gershuni, who died not many years ago, leading artist of the 80s, of the 90s, a great painter, and one of the key avant-gardists of the early 70s, together with all these artists that I mentioned, was then taking snapshots, accidental snapshots of landscape in between the kibbutzim and the Arab villages. Some landscape here, some landscape there, okay. He did it through a bus that served the group to move from one place to another to do the actual work of art in the different spots. So now he took the photographs of the landscapes, hung them around the dining hall of kibbutz Barkai, it's a nearby kibbutz, okay, asking the people of the kibbutz to come in the evening to the dining for a discussion and bring with them personal photographs, or one photograph each, from the family album, okay? Each one would pick a passport photograph or a group photograph of that and stick it to one of the photographs that he chooses, okay? And people did it in the evening. But immediately there was aroused a dispute between the people. No, I want this. No, this land is my land, as you see, okay? And then the discussion, what's a land? What's a place? What's your place? What's a territory? What's behind the territory? Okay, so we're talking about works with a profound sense of political thinking, critical one, which has to do with the conquered territories in the Six-Day War. The three people, artists that I mentioned, this is Avital Geva from his back, this is Micha Ullman from his back, and this is Moshe Gershuni from his back. when the three of them, as a conceptual work, as an idea work, went to kibbutz Givat Chaim, not too far, to meet with Yitzhak Ben Aaron, by that time a legendary chairman of the Workers' Union and famous for his radical ideology of socialism and peace, etc., etc. And for these artists, going to meet him meant a declaration of intent, of artistic intention concerning the unity of art and moral commitment. Okay, so this is 1972, when this guy is the same Joseph Beuys, you remember the fact versus felt before. In Germany at that time, he was more than God. I mean, he was metaphysically enormous in his reputation. Still is, by the way, in Europe, and not only in Europe. At that time, 72, he was fired from the Kunst Academy in Düsseldorf, or the Art Academy, because of his political involvements. And immediately he formed a new party, Green Party, the ecological one, democracy and ecology, with his students, preaching for the unity of art and life, with the idea that everybody is an artist and that art's duty is to change society, to move society forward, etc., etc. Why do I say that? Because as a response to this declaration, in 1976, a young artist from a school named the College Art School, in Hebrew, Hamidrasha, was doing this work that is called a rather famous work called A Letter to Beuys, to Joseph Beuys, where she photographed, her name is Tamar Getter, Getter, photographed here, photographed herself covered, wrapped with a felt blanket, recounting here 3 versions of autobiographies, 3 different ones. One contradicts the other, where she's begging Joseph Beuys, it's a letter to Joseph Beuys, begging him to send her how miserable she is, and she asked him to send her coats and shoes. Okay, of course, as an ironic comment about this call of Beuys to artists to work for society and change the world. Okay. Now I'm entering now. I'm starting a small group of artists here that all of them belong to the so-called the College Art School, because at that time of the 70s there was a great rivalry, a great competition between the 2 leading art schools of the time. The main one was the Bezalel Art School, which we know from the first lecture. The second one is Hamidrasha, which was in Tel Aviv, then in the Ramat HaSharon, then in Herzliya, now we moved to another place recently. But we're talking about not just rivalries between schools, but between art ideologies, like one can say even almost art movements, okay, that collided in the 1970s. So another college art, the art school, David Ginton, for instance, out of admiration or curiosity at Joseph Beuys' activity, went to Düsseldorf, knocked on the door, wanted to meet with the artist. The artist was not home. So he was photographed by his wife, a famous curator in Israel, Ellen Ginton, kneeling in the front door of Joseph Beuys, either as an admiration act or as an ironic act about, over admiration of the artist. During the 73 war, we're talking 73, the same David Ginton wrote down on a piece of stone, art at the time of war, Omanut Shat Milchama. But the letters were done with explosives, with dynamite, and he exploded. So this mingling of conceptual idea art and violence concerning the war was also expressed in another piece that he did during the 73 war. He went around his campus, the Hebrew University. He was studying philosophy, took photographs of the campus, and then shot them with a rifle. Okay, as an idea art about war, study, knowledge. Okay, humanities, philosophy, etc., etc. Another case of famous artist from the same group, the same school, the college art school, named Michal Ne'eman. She won the Israel Prize, the top prize in Israel as an artist. In 1974, early 1974, she installed this sign at the seashore of Tel Aviv, okay, saying, the eyes of the state. Okay, the words were originally taken from a sentence that was expressed by a soldier that was fighting a strong point, a serious strong point on the Hermon Mount that was first was taken by the Syrians, and then half fight. Israel really won the place, and the commander told him, and this was broadcasted in the radio of the time. The soldier said that his commander told them that they must fight hard because this strong point is the eyes of the state, because the intelligence, used it as to look and to hear into Syria. Okay, but now there comes this Michal Ne'eman. First of all, she changes the map of Israel, the borders of Israel. Now the border is not there on Syrian line, but Tel Aviv and the seashore, okay? But more than that, okay, she claims that the real eyes of the state are the artist's eyes, okay, and not the intelligence eyes. And the last one that I bring from this group, from this camp of artists from the college art school, is a work that was done in 73, 74, 73, 74 by Ofrat Natan, or Nathan, that you see here, at the artist's house. By the way, this is Michal Ne'eman. I think this is Tamar Getter of the time. So in the artist's house of Tel Aviv, she put a long black plastic sheet on which she added a mattress, some iron bed, some blanket in the shape of a pear, and a sign Palestine here, stuck into two boots in front. The work was called The Passages of the Jordan, where the artist with flags on her shoulder, she crosses, she makes, all these objects are objects of a refugee, okay? And now she's passing the passage of the Jordan, connecting ideally the Israeli and the Palestinian camps. So again, art as a protest, art as a utopia, art as a political, symbolic, metaphoric act. But if talking about political involvement in art, the stronger one, the more direct one, the more daring one, the braver one, is done by the students of the Bezalel of the same years. Now you see, for instance, two of the students. They were my students, by the way, and those days. His name is Sharon Karen, and this is Gabi Klasmer, today one of the more famous painters of Israel. At that time, they went to the Jerusalem theater, where a ceremony of awards, of medal awards, was going on. The veterans of the war of '73. They were disguising themselves as wounded, as a war wounded, okay, with medals on the bandage or on the jacket, okay, and walking in between the veterans, of course, in a silent protest, okay, about wars and about medals and about heroism, etc., etc. The same Sharon Karen, who stood on the right side, gave his final work to Bezalel, fourth year, 1974, by showing a series of letters that he exchanged with the Ministry of Interior, where he demands the minister to change his name, Sharon's name, into Fatma Khaled. Well, Fatma is a she name, it's a feminine Arab name. Khaled reminds everybody in Israel of those times of Laila Khaled, which was a notorious terrorist, was known for kidnapping airplanes. Okay, and of course the minister says no, and there's another letter, and a series of letters until there was a compromise where Sharon Karen was allowed to change his name to Adam. Mensch, okay, human being. Those days were stormy days in the art department of Bezalel. There was then revolt, the students and teachers and avant-garde teachers revolted against painting lessons, because conceptual art, you remember, is not about painting, about doing real works of art. Okay, so they resisted the courses, the lesson. They went out, they would sit in the cafeteria, sing songs, yeah, and do some radical acts against the directors, the head of the department, the head of the school, etc., etc. They would walk in the streets, the students, wearing military eyeballs on their back, as if they are the coming victims of the next war. Those days there was a plan to, and which was carried out eventually, to have a military march in Jerusalem in 1974, which was not acceptable by the revolting students of Bezalel, who they made terrible things. They wrote swastikas on the walls. They painted the head of the department door in black. They wouldn't let him go into his office, etc., etc. And against that planned military march, they painted the streets of Jerusalem with images, two-dimensional images of soldiers, of tanks, of airplanes, etc., etc. And at the top of it, they organized. I was the organizer, to be honest. That time, what were the days? Yeah, I was teaching both at the art department of Bezalel and at the theater department of the Hebrew University. So I organized a demonstration of students from both institutions and teachers against, it's march, okay? This is our march, okay? The alternative march. Well, you ask, where is Gideon? Where is the lecturer? Well, he's hiding in the back. Why is he hiding in the back? Because he knows that down there in Zion Square, there are waiting policemen on horses that will beat us terribly, okay? This is my first wife, okay? Who was arrested few minutes afterwards, okay, by the policeman. These are all students that I recognize. This was Jackie Greenberg, an American teacher who came to teach in the theater department. I don't know what happened to her. I haven't seen her since. Fantastic woman. And this guy here, okay, is a very, very famous art designer, maybe the leading art designer of our times, sitting in London, named Ron Arad. Okay, so here is still a student at Bezalel, and he's walking with this march. So you had the radical students and teachers of Bezalel versus the conceptual works of the Tel Aviv school Midrashah, and in between you had artists who were resisting in their own conceptual ways the political acts of the times and the leaders of the time, especially resisting or criticizing Moshe Dayan and Golda Meir was terribly hated by the left wing. And we must explain, and I think it's obvious from what I'm saying, because I didn't make a selection. Israeli art, until very recently, was always at the very leftist side of the map, okay? So it would be anti-consensual, okay? So we're talking now about Michael Brooks, again, late Michael Brooks, who was by then already in London for the rest of his life, since the early 70s, where he tries to block the appearance of the leaders on the monitor of his television at home, either by putting his hand against or knocking, a knockout here, or putting a flower pot in front of and sometimes even taking down his pants and photographing his behind as to block the view of the Israeli politicians. Another example of the relation to Golda Meir was a collage work by Rafi Lavi. Rafi Lavi was, I'm using too much the word mythological, but he was a mythological teacher at the school, that art school of the college art school in Tel Aviv. Very influential, very charismatic over his students. As an artist, he was an abstract pop artist, very influenced by Rauschenberg, but a little different. Anyhow, in 1974, or before that, 72, I think, that was, right after the war, he took a photo of a reproduction of Golda Meir, painting of a portrait that was distributed by Bank Hapoalim, the Workers' Bank, to the masses, okay? Beheaded Golda by cutting her head, taking this reproduction, old etching of Dome of the Rock, beheading the dome, combining the two beheaded worshipped, what shall I say, entities together, thus mocking both, mocking the idea of aberration, of worshipping, etc., etc. Or another one, 74, another famous Israeli artist of that time, the late Uri Lifshitz, made this triptych where Golda Meir is seen from her back, a youngster sitting here with fingers of a predator, another youngster that is covered here by these photos here, aiming a spear, sticking it to the Golda's, picking Golda's elbow. So we're talking about aggressiveness, aggression against Golda Meir, who aroused many critical feelings within the left wings in Israel, especially following the big failure of the 73 war. 75, the summer of 75, there was in Israel Museum an important exhibition called Open Workshop, where the two groups, the two camps of the two schools were combined, and not only them, conceptual artists, the political artists, the avant-garde artists from different cities in Israel were showing their works, For instance, this terrace wall here was created by Sharon and Gabi, who we saw before with the bandages, with the help, assistance of of an Arab worker who was asked to bring his photo album photographs of himself and his family that was spread on the wall here. And the meaning, of course, political meaning. So you have a Palestinian landscape. We're talking about authenticity of the landscape, the connection between Palestinians and the place, okay, between Palestinians, humans, I mean, the photographs, the family, etc., and the worker, okay. Another angle, you see the same work. And as you can see, in addition, here a small part of the American flag. There was a huge flag, okay, hung on the wall by Pinchas Cohen Gunn, who was not happy with the over-Americanization of Israeli culture and art, although very soon he will arrive to New York and spend here several years and make a little career here. Here he is in 74, 75. I mean, he was born in Meknes, Morocco. And he was and still is feeling himself as a refugee in Israel, as if it's not his real place, it's not real belonging, okay? So this is why he went to the Palestinian camp near Jericho and built on the spot the 2 tents, okay? To say, I'm a refugee too, like you, okay? Although he went back to his nice flat in Jerusalem, okay? In another work from 75, okay, he advertised an advertisement in a newspaper calling for artists, Arab artists in different states around Israel, to come one day, the same hour, to start walking together with him towards the border, or borders that divide the countries, okay, until they're being stopped by the border policemen, okay, where they would dig a hole in the ground and bury a metal piece that they have with them, signifying the artist border, okay? There's the artist border, there's political general. Here you see Pinchas going down. It's a student from Bezalel, also was my student, Moti Mizrahi, and this is Mark Sheps, a famous, who would become the head of Tel Aviv Museum some years afterwards. Not some, a few years afterwards. Now we're back with our friend Joshua Neustein. I didn't plan that it would be around him, so but as it happened is here. Well, he did in 75 another important work where he took a dog from a neighbor in Jerusalem, a German Shepherd, as you can see, kind of, drove him together with him to the Golan Heights. So let's remember, we're talking about an artist who was born in Poland, in Danzig, afterwards a refugee with his family as a child in Russia, arriving to the United States in 48, okay, and then in 64, moving to Israel for a while, okay. So we are talking about a Jewish wanderer, okay, a man who asks, where is my place, where is my home, where is my territory, where is my land, okay. This is an introduction to this work. I mean, we're talking about the dog being carried to the Golan Heights, occupied territories and other territories. Israel, at that time, it's not yet declared as an Israeli territory. The dog jumps out from the car, starts peeing around, you know, and immediately, and Joshua behind him, wherever he pees, sticks a little poster saying vital territory, the Shetach Chiyuni, okay? The title here, territorial imperative, I take it as an echo to a famous book that came out in 1966 by Robert Ardrey, in English called Imperative, where Ardrey analyzed the idea of territory as a biological need, okay? So another indirect political comment and autobiographical, personal expression of a man who's asking what's a territory, what's my territory, what's not, okay? His friend Jerry Marks, that we mentioned before, is the one who was responsible for the sound of Jerusalem River, etc. Also the sound of the Boots environment from '69. Now was photographing snapshots along the seam line, the borderline between the Jewish part of Jerusalem and the eastern part of the Arab part of Jerusalem. So along he took these photographs, bringing them to meet his friend at the Golan Heights, putting the photographs on the ground, taking first some steps backward and shooting with a rifle at the photographs. So you have here violence, a military violence, territory, land, and the question of the different territories, Jewish, Arab, Syrian, Israeli, done by an artist again, not as Neustein, but still coming from the United States and wondering about his place, okay? At that time, 1977, I mentioned the name of Moshe Gershuni, the important painter, the one who photographed landscapes around and with a personal photograph of the kibbutznikim, etc., etc. Now in '77, he's a very admired teacher at Bezalel Art School, but one of those who refused to teach art. Okay, he's a conceptual artist. So together with his students, he would sit in the cafeteria and sing songs instead of giving the lesson. And those days, he was asking his students and himself to take pieces of paper, either torn or found paper, whatever piece of paper, paint them in red, like blood, okay, and writing, the problem of painting is the Palestinian problem, and sticking the papers behind car wipers that park in the streets, okay? 36 later, a young Israeli, a very contemporary young Israeli named Shai Heskeli will respond to this world by writing the same problem of the painting, meaning the painting, the problem is still there, okay? Nothing changed. Now you see Gershuni singing, this time in some party at the Jerusalem workshop in Jerusalem, but that was typical, as I said, he liked to sing. And even as in his artworks of those times, he sang songs. For instance, the song named Yad Anuga, Gentle Hand, okay? This is a work that he did in 1970, 71, okay? When he drew the word Yad Anuga as something in between drawing and conceptual work. Yad Anuga is the name of a rather famous love song, and it's a very old love song that has a melody influenced by Bedouin music, okay? So by singing this love song, he also expressed this duality of Jewish and Palestinian cultures, okay? And trying to combine them both. He would sing this song of Yad Anuga like a muezzin, you know, the one who calls for prayers in the mosque, okay? By installing a loudspeaker on the roof of Israel Museum or on the second floor of the Artist's House in Tel Aviv. And to the world hears him singing like a muezzin, like an Arab. Yad Anuga, etc., etc. She had a gentle hand, but, and the but is very essential here, together with this song, he would read aloud through the loudspeaker an article that appeared in the newspaper telling the witnessing of Ziad Yusuf, a Palestinian, who tells how he was stripped by settlers with dogs that attacked him violently, okay? How he was tortured. So for Gershuni was singing Gentle Hand and describing a gentle hand, another kind of gentle hand, okay. 76, I was responsible, sorry that I talk about myself, generally I don't do it in my lectures, but as it had the 70s are my heroic days, you know. And I organized that those days. The first Israeli festival of performance art. It is performance art meant visual artists performing either with a body, doing something with a body, with an object together, but performance. At that time, I coined a word. The word meitzag. The Israelis may know the word meitzag. It's my invention. So this is in the catalog of that exhibition. And in that festival, there were many, mostly students and teachers and artists of Jerusalem, and a few from the Tel Aviv, from the camp of the Rafi Lavi and the college art school, but mainly from Jerusalem, which explains why the same Sharon Karen, who was trying to change his name, etc., wounded soldier, etc., was standing in front of the public, of the audience, in his performance, because there was one artist after the other performing the piece, which meant very short one, 2-3 minutes maximum. Okay, a blackboard nearby next to him. He's wearing a Che Guevara hat and teaching in details the audience how to prepare Molotov bottles. I mean, bombs. Okay, something that wouldn't be accepted today would be arrested immediately. So in order to defend himself, he added this Joker sign in the catalog. This is a page from the catalog. Okay. Another student from Bezalel, that I'm the leader of the revolt, a leader of the rebels of Bezalel those days, his name was Menachem Chaimovich, who later on would move to America, to New York, become here a contractor, house contractor. I haven't seen him since. But that time was very charismatic, really leading the revolt, which, as I said, was quite aggressive in Bezalel. You see a drawing of his with throwing hand grenades and rifles versus museums, galleries, government offices, industrial cooperatives, etc., etc. What he was doing in this performance festival in '76 was he installed 4 cardboard, 2-dimensional cardboard puppets of Prime Minister, Minister of Security, and other 2 ministers, I don't remember which. Then he went back, a rifle in one hand, a gun, real rifle, real gun, and in front of the people around, okay, was shooting the puppets and knocking them down. Okay, at that moment, one of the rebels of Bezalel was there, one of his friends, burst forward, grabbed the gun from his hand, and began shooting watercolors of a one-woman show that was shown around the artist house, smashing them all together. I was shocked. As an organizer, I was trembling. I was white. I canceled the whole festival in the middle. And during that night, the whole night until morning, we spent hours in Micha Ullman's study in Herzliya, where he repainted the watercolors, which I framed early in the morning on Ibn Gurion Street in Tel Aviv, and hanging the works in their places. The artist, until her last days, before she died, didn't know that the one who did her works was Micha Ullman, and not her. Okay. So we are approaching the end of this lecture, reminding us the 1977 so-called upheaval, a mahapach, where Menachem Begin, the right wing, took power, becoming prime minister, and nominating, that's important to our story, nominating as a minister of culture a man from Zvulun Hammer, from the religious national party, which meant for the Israeli left wing disaster, the end of the world. Fascism is there, you know, that's it. One of the reactions to that blow, political blow for the left wing in Israel, takes us back to Avital Geva from the Ein Shemer kibbutz, you remember, who was, still is very politically involved and very radical. And of course became much more radical with the times, with the happenings of the times, with the political developments of the time. And with Menachem Begin's reluctance to push forward the peace process that would come through a little later, but at that time it was taken by the left wing as if he's trying to avoid it. Okay. So Avital Geva went to the so-called kibbutz gallery in Tel Aviv. There is a kibbutz gallery in Tel Aviv. Turned it, it's not about art for it, turned it into a petition bureau of signing letters against the prime minister. Copying on the wall, Chagall's Fiddler on the Roof, one of them, hinting at the Minister of Education, religious Minister of Education, okay? With his friends from the kibbutz, his students from Bezalel and others, was throwing mud and rotten vegetables at the painting as if Chagall is responsible for all the disasters of the time and place, and declaring, I'm quitting the art world altogether, which he did. We're talking 78, and since this very moment, yeah, he's still not part of it, okay, unless you'll hear in a second something. Instead, he would build in the middle of the kibbutz, Ein Shemer, near the dining hall, an enormous educational experimental greenhouse where he will teach youngsters of the kibbutzim around, including Arab youngsters from the villages around, how to grow a vegetable, how to grow a tomato, how to grow experimental huge cucumbers, this size, okay? How to research soil alternatives, growing fish, okay, in layers, that one layer takes care of the other layer, etc., etc. How to research water systems or water solutions to problem, etc., with computers in the same bus that was taking around in 72, the group of the artists now within the greenhouse with computers inside, and the students, the young, you see them, you know, they're standing in a fish pool that where a vegetable garden's floating, okay, and the fish are underneath, okay. So this is one of the experiments of the. It's a fantastic place. It's an admirable institution. Many come to see it, to study it. Take an example. Just 1 second. I'm about to finish in 2 minutes. 93. Was it March? Was it April? I had an idea. I was just nominated as a curator of Israeli Pavilion at the Venice Biennial. And I didn't have a good idea for what to show. I felt one must show in Venice something spectacular, something big, something different, not paintings or sculpture. I felt it's not enough. I came to Ein Shemer, I entered the greenhouse. I met with him, with Avital, who was the nicest person in the world. And I proposed him to transfer the whole greenhouse, 8 meters high, 2 acres, to the very heart of the biennial, to the Jardini, between the trees. Okay. He was shocked. And also bringing some scores of youngsters. He was shocked. And after a lot of thoughts and a lot of trouble that he gave me, and there was a big problem of raising the budget, because who would support cucumbers, in Venice? Okay, but I got one who gave me the $500,000 to do it. Okay, and there you have it. There you have it. Okay, now you're in Venice. Okay, the water, the shower, the floating little garden, the cucumbers, half-meter cucumbers growing there, the chairs that he built. Okay, this was a happy center for the. I'm not trying to compliment myself, but it was a happy. I don't say it was a good. I don't say it's important. It was a happy place. People came. There were very hot outside. The air conditioning, how do you call it? Ventilators were working, so it was cool and coffee was served, and it was an interesting place to be. I'm very optimistic, okay, full of life and about life and art and life, which we were talking about during all this lecture. And then we were told that the president of Italy will pay us a visit. He chose only 3 pavilions to visit. Of course, the Italian one, and of course, the American ones, and the Israeli, greenhouse. That was very exciting. The whole area was evacuated by policemen and soldiers. And there I was standing. Avital gave on one side, and the new Minister of Education, the leftist by then, Shulamit Aloni on the other side, okay? Me holding a bunch of cucumbers. Enormous, with yellow flowers on the top, waiting for the exciting me to the president. Came with his entourage, wearing this thing here, and I was trying to remember the one Italian phrase that I was taught minutes before, saying, "Our cucumbers, Mr. President." He came to me, I handed him the cucumbers bunch, and I told him loudly, "Nostri cetrioli, il presidente." The guy didn't know what to do with it. He looked at me like a man who handed his paper on. And this was the end of the story, and this is the end of our lecture. And what's your question?
Same year, it was 8 or 9 years ago, it was the year of the Shemitah, and we were developing a sukkah. He worked with everybody in the JCC from the nursery school on. We built a beautiful sukkah on the top, all made with water bottles, filled with water, and he was growing algae and stuff. It was all over the lobby. It was an extraordinary moment. I mean, he was like our artist in residence.
So you know how nice he is.
The nicest man in the world. Yeah. But he was here and he did an art project for the JCC.
Nice. Good. Thank you for coming.